right, well, we are a couple minutes after the hour, so let's go ahead and begin our program. Welcome, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Glidden with MHP, and we are excited to present again what's turned into, I think, sort of an annual update to the State Housing Tax Credit Program. Um, and Brian, if you could kind of throw up our agenda, we'll do just a quick walkthrough first of what we're planning to do today. And then we're going to turn to our first speaker. So we are excited to welcome Chrissy Mills. She is the State Housing Tax Credit Program Manager from Minnesota Housing. She's going to give an overview of the program and some updates that are particular to MHFA. We have Mary Tingerthal, who is going to help us understand the progression of the program, with some program results and lessons learned. We will be joined by Tom Johnson, who has been here on other programs as well in past years to talk, bring his perspective as an accountant on just how the program works for contributors and some considerations from that aspect. And then we're going to turn to sharing some stories of success. We're happy that Mark Borseth from DigiKey is here. They have been a contributor to a project in Thief River Falls, and we'll be pleased to hear a little bit more about that. And we'll round things off by talking about our legislative objectives for continuing to strengthen the state housing tax credit program. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Chrissy Mills. And Chrissy, did you want your slides up or?
Sure, if you want to, that would be
Okay,
fantastic.
Brian, if you're able to grab that, but maybe just go ahead and get going. Thank you, Chrissy.
Great. Thank you so much. Hello everyone. My name is Chrissy Mills, and I'm the program manager for the State Housing Tax Credit Program and Contribution Fund. So I'm here today to talk about what's coming up for the program in 2026. So just a quick refresher for the program. Taxpayers can contribute from $1,000 up to $2 million per year. And in return, they get a state tax credit, which is worth 85% of their contribution. And when they make that contribution, they're able to indicate if they want it to go to a particular project. And we call that a designated contribution. So you'll hear me use those words a few times here throughout my little spiel. So you may remember last year in 2025, the credits were requested really quickly. We opened up in February, and by the end of March, all of the tax credits were requested. In previous years, the program had actually gone all the way through December. So this was really fast and kind of surprising and very exciting. So I know everyone's kind of burning question today is going to be to know, well, when is the program going to open for contributions in 2026? So unfortunately, I don't have that date today, but I expect we're going to be announcing it next week and expect the open date will be sometime in February. So we are exploring one potential change for 2026. You may recall that originally the state housing tax credit authorizing legislation included a few different set-asides, including one for smaller communities outside of the metropolitan area, and then the legislature subsequently removed those set-asides from the program legislation. A request was made this year for Minnesota Housing to consider reestablishing a geographic set-aside to help ensure balance between the 7-county metro region and greater Minnesota for those designated contributions. So as an example, the program could reserve a certain percentage of the annual available credits for designated contributions for projects in greater Minnesota and for projects in the metro. If that percentage wasn't used by a certain date, then the remaining amount would be open to the entire state. The state housing tax credit program operates under legislation held both in Minnesota housing statute and also in the Department of Revenue's statutes. And we're currently reviewing both sets of legislation to determine if such a geographic set aside is still allowable under the statutes, or if such a tool would require a statutory change. So if it is determined that a change can be made under the current statutes, that change is going to need to be approved by our leadership and the Minnesota Housing Board of Directors. So more to come on this. If we move forward with the change and it is approved, we'll of course send out communications with that information, and that would happen after the Board of Directors meeting in January. So just wanted to give kind of a heads up on that. That's something we're looking at. But whether or not that change happens, the process to request the tax credits in 2026, it's going to be the same for taxpayers as it was in 2025. So I'll give you a quick overview of what that looks like. Eligible taxpayers are going to complete and submit the online contribution application. And submitting a contribution application is what actually reserves those state housing tax credits while Minnesota Housing reviews that information. If the application is accepted, the applicant is going to receive an email, typically within 10 business days, and that's going to have a document that they need to electronically sign, and it includes the payment instructions. If for some reason the application is not accepted, or if it was incomplete and we just need more information, Minnesota Housing staff is going to reach out directly to the applicant to let them know we still need information. To secure those tax credits, the applicant must return the signed document and the full payment within the time frame specified in the email, and that's usually around 30 days. If they do not submit those items, it may result in the withdrawal of the application and then those tax credits being issued to another taxpayer. So it's important that they follow those timelines. And of course, once Minnesota Housing receives the document and funds, we issue that tax credit certificate within 30 days. So like I said, the process is the same as last year, and I don't anticipate any changes to that general process. So as a developer, kind of what can you do? Well, one, you can reach out to your potential contributors to get them ready to request those tax credit certificates when that application timeframe opens up. And you also have the option to register your project with Minnesota Housing. And what this does is it just helps Minnesota Housing properly track contributions to projects that come in. And it also provides the developer with the opportunity to have a technical assistance meeting with Minnesota Housing staff just to get a better understanding of the program. If you've never worked with it before, we can answer any questions and just kind of talk through your project. After that project's registered, Minnesota Housing will provide the developer with a registration number and letter. Now, this process isn't required. We do encourage it. And I'll also note it's different than registering a project on Minnesota Housing Partnership's website. So if you register a project with one, it doesn't register it with the other. So it's kind of a two-step process. I think Mary might touch base a little bit on Minnesota Housing Partnership's webpage. So I'm not going to go into great detail on that right now. If you want to register your project, we do have a link on our webpage on the Minnesota Housing's State Housing Tax Credit webpage. And of course, if you have any questions just generally about the program before you even register it, my contact information is out there, and I'm happy to set up a meeting so we can talk through any questions that you have. All right, and then if we can flip to the next slide on the presentation, please. All right, so finally, in October, the National Council of State Housing Agencies, the acronym for that, NCHSA, recognized Minnesota Housing with a Special Achievement Award for the State Housing Tax Credit Program as a means of addressing the affordable housing community's toughest challenges. So just want to give a big thank you to everyone for getting the word out there and helping to make this program a success. So thank you very much for that. Elizabeth, I can turn it back to you and see if you want to go to the next speaker, questions, whatever you'd like to do.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. I think just for folks to know, we have enough flexibility in our program that if you have comments or questions that are specific to each speaker, we can go ahead and take those. So I'm just looking at the chat before we move on to see if there's anything. And I think Chrissy is able to stick around too in case
Yes.
something comes up a little bit later. And then just as we're turning to our next speaker, Mary Tingerthal, I wanted to call out that we have a special guest who's joined that I wasn't expecting, Senator Carla Nelson. I just wanted to mention her specifically because we have had many lawmaker champions over the years, but Senator Nelson really has been that champion who was there from the very beginning. And we have so much to thank her for. I'm excited that she's here for this program. And if she's able to stick around, we would love to hear from her maybe a little bit later in the program. But just really wanted to say so much appreciation and thank you to her. We do have a couple questions in the chat, so maybe we can take those before we turn to Mary, because we do have time in the program. So Paul asks, how does a donor complete the application process without a computer and email?
Great question. What you would have them do is actually contact me, and then I will fill out the computer part for them, and that, essentially reserves their tax credits, and then I'll mail them the physical document to sign.
So, and then Kristen, I might need your help, Kristen, to kind of make sure I'm understanding your question. You said you're trying to find out what's the best way to tell which projects are for 2026 versus old ones so you can help promote them to potential contributors. And so, Kristen, are you asking about projects that are listed on MHP's website or some other place?
I guess I was thinking specifically about MHP, but if there's a better solution elsewhere, like the Minnesota Housing, like direct site, open to either option.
So, I'm going to answer this for right now, and then we're going to return to this. But we are right now kind of going through a process of strongly encouraging everyone who has submitted a project to make sure that they have let us know if that project should be removed or it should be edited or updated. So it will take that project owner to let us know that those updates need to be made. We are not able to just determine that on by ourselves. So again, we are actively reaching out, sending repeat messages, and just to kind of let you know, I think our staff has said that they've probably had about 60 to 70 requests for edits and updates. And so we are working through that process to make sure everything is as up to date as possible. Um, and I see some thanks to Senator Nelson. We have a contributor ask if Heidi from Beacon is asking if Beacon can fill out paperwork for the contributor. Is that allowed, or is it better to send them to you, Chrissy?
I think it's going to be, I mean, they're going to have to share personal information, such as their social security number. So it's going to be what they're comfortable with. If they're in the room with you and you're walking them through it, that's going to be something you guys need to decide together. You can always send them over to me.
Here is a related question, which someone is asking if a contributor could fill out paperwork to, so to speak, reserve their tax credit prior to the actual launch of the program. So trying to get in line, maybe, so to speak, for making a contribution.
Great question. No, they wouldn't be able to because that portal, when we announce the contribution application date, that's the date people can start putting their information in and actually reserving those tax credits.
Noah asks, what determines that an applicant is ineligible for a contribution apart from an incomplete application?
So far, I haven't come across anything in an application that would make us say, no, we can't take your contribution. What I have run into a few times is people maybe misunderstand the program and think they're actually requesting funds through the application, not actually contributing funds. So that's one way that those applications get withdrawn. I'll just also mention that we don't, at Minnesota Housing, we don't review someone's tax information to know what their tax liabilities are. So folks are really going to want to talk to their CPAs to make sure they understand their tax situation when claiming that credit.
So, next question is what happens if more dollars are contributed than the actual cost of a registered project? Is an organization still able to access those designated contributions?
Sorry, I was trying to read along and then lost it part way.
Okay.
So what happens if more dollars than the actual cost? So they would have to be, so the funds have to go to the project in which they were designated toward. So, I mean, we'll have to look at and see what all of your costs actually are, if there's any way to use the funds in that project. We haven't had this happen, but I would imagine some of those funds might be declined and sent back to the general contribution pool as an option. Um, like I said, we haven't had that come up yet.
Okay. That's a great question.
It
There was
is.
one that was ahead of that. I'm sorry, were you done, Chrissy?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I skipped. I think we're getting quite a few questions, which is great that we're able to
Mhm.
workshop this here.
Yeah.
Going backwards to one I missed, if a registered project receives over $100,000 in contributions, is there additional documentation required? And comparing to, I guess, a situation from last year.
I'm not sure what that's referring to.
Okay.
The documentation is the same regardless of the contribution amount. The disbursements change if it's over $100,000. So maybe that's what that's referring to. But Christine, if you want to maybe either pop some more context onto that, be happy to take a look at that question again.
All right. Let's see. I think we've got time for maybe just a couple more, and then let's turn to our next speaker. Um, All right. So Nathan asks about projects that still are in progress from last year. Is it okay to continue to solicit contributions to those projects?
Sure. So I think what the question is, if you've received funds last year through designated contributions and we haven't closed that loan yet, can you still keep getting contributions for that? And the answer is yes. You can get contributions year over year for the same project.
Okay. Um, will the application be located on the same web page as last year? We'd like to build a link into, okay, so someone is thinking about how they as an organization can help hyperlink to those materials.
That makes sense. And yes, I expect it's going to be the same link as last year.
Okay. And then I see from the chat that Senator Nelson has another obligation. I'm not sure if she's left or not, but again, thank you to her for joining the call.
Thank you so much. I am
There
going
you
to
are.
just pop off, but please do send me that link, the updated link or resend for new applications. And congrats to all. I think it's been a great program, especially reach out to Mary Tingerthal. You were very essential as we got this kicked off. So well done. All have a great holiday and I'll catch up with you later. But do send me the link and the important things I can share. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your
Senator.
support.
Wonderful. Well, that's exciting that we were able to have some greetings from her.
Yeah.
And it's a nice segue, I think, to updates from Mary Tingerthal. And if folks continue to have more questions, please put them in the chat. Looks like we got a robust list of questions for how to make this program work the best possible. Mary.
Great. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And for those of you who may not know me, I served as commissioner of the Housing Finance Agency from 2011 to 2019. And the legislation to create the state housing tax credit was actually first introduced while I was still commissioner. Didn't pass until shortly after I left. But I've had a real interest in working with MHP and other organizations to get the word out about this very unusual program. I'm not surprised it was recognized nationally by MHFA's colleagues because it is really very unusual and taps into the energy and creativity of both individual and corporate taxpayers in a way that very few other tools do around the country. So congratulations to all of you who've had a role in making the trajectory of this program a pretty amazing ride. I pulled together some data about the last 3 years just to give you an idea of how the program has grown and shifted and changed over a very short period of time. So 2023 was the first year, and I had a very short amount of time to get the word out about something very, very new. And even given that, we were able to bring in almost $7 million worth of contributions in that very first year. Almost 400 individuals and corporations stepped up. And at that time, quite a few of the projects were, in fact, designated. Come 2024, as Chrissy mentioned, we thought we would have the entire year again. We didn't know if we'd make that $11.6 million maximum. We did, and in fact, people were a little surprised that we got there a little bit earlier than what the deadline had been, which had been about a week after the December 3rd date on which that ceiling was reached. And then, of all things, last year, or this year, I should say, earlier this year, the program was open and it filled up in March. And I should have said March 31st. But just to give you an idea of the incredible reach and demand of this program and why it's important, if you're thinking about pursuing contributors for a project you're working on, that you get started early. And I'll talk more about that. Next slide, please. I think I'm going to answer the next question that's in the chat with this next slide. So over the last 3 years, I want to call your attention to the bottom line first. And that is that over the 3 years, the amount of dollars that have gone to designated projects that Chrissy talked about has gone from 74% in the first year all the way up to 98% in 2025. So it's really clear that contributors like the idea of knowing that their dollars are going to a specific project. And I might add that that has a lot to do with why the legislation was changed to remove the geographic designation, because the geographic designations were only applied to funds in the general fund. And so there was very little left to have to go through a long and complicated process of allocating those general funds. And it just seemed like a good idea. How does that split between Greater Minnesota and Metro? Well, in the first year, Greater Minnesota, I would say, got a little slower start. It was a little harder to get the word out in Greater Minnesota. As Senator Nelson mentioned, she did a meeting with us down in Rochester to try to get a little more momentum going. And that certainly helped, but the dollars were fairly minor in Greater Minnesota in the first year. But they surged well ahead in 2024, capturing $4 million of the 10.7 of designated dollars. Now, there was still 8% that went into the general fund that year. And in 2025, Greater Minnesota held its own at $4.1 million. The reason the Metro number is a little bigger is because that designated percentage went up. So I think it's a great track record. And on the next slide, we'll talk about how that's split between rental and homeownership. Next slide, please. So you might say, well, how does that shake out for rental versus homeownership in Metro and Greater Minnesota? So in 2023, a fairly small portion went to homeownership, but by 2024, it was up over $2 million. And one of the things I think is so exciting about the variety of projects that can be supported by this program is that it was a lot of projects, a lot of individual projects. And I know that there are a lot of representatives of Greater Minnesota Habitat chapters on the call today and very active in the program. And even a small contribution can really make a big difference when you're dealing with the development of a single house. So it's been a real motivator. I know I've spoken at a number of presentations, getting people excited about the fact that they can bring their own contributions into this program for a project in their community. And then finally, in 2025, we did have 13 rental projects, but 29 homeowner projects. And I do want to say that of the rental projects, 3 of the larger projects that were supported were in Greater Minnesota. So it's not a split between homeownership in Greater Minnesota and rental in the metro area. There are 3 very important rental projects that were funded this year. And one of those you're going to hear about from Mark Borseth from DigiKey in just a few minutes. Next slide, please. It's been a lot of fun for me over the last 3 years to work with a variety of developers, potential donors, tax professionals, all to figure out how do we talk about this program and how do you really convince people that it's worth looking at this seriously as an investment and understanding what that tax credit will mean for them, either personally or as a corporation. I'm going to talk now specifically to people who are developers or working with development organizations. My first piece of advice is start early. Plan now. Start planning right now for a project that you want to get contributed funds in 2027. I don't know this for a fact, but I am guessing that we will see the same sort of speed of the tax credit ceiling being reached fairly early on in the year. And so I'm not saying don't try to do a project for 2026, but hopefully you're fairly well along if you are already working on a project and are beginning to line up contributors for 2026. Take some time to figure out what kinds of projects appeal to contributors. Some of the projects that I've seen that have come forward that really seem to connect with people are ones that are hitting a chord in their neighborhood. You'll hear from Mark Borseth about a workforce housing project in Thief River Falls where DigiKey, an employer, stood up and said, we really need to build workforce housing and we're willing to support it with our dollars through this program. Also, individual homeownership projects can be literally in someone's neighborhood, and they may want to make sure that that project happens down the street from them. But you know from your communities what people are talking about, what kinds of housing. It might be senior housing. It might be family housing. It might be home ownership. But thinking about what will really appeal in your community. Then get as specific about your project as early as you possibly can. I do recommend that you register your project with MHFA, even though it's not required, because Chrissy is an amazing administrator, and you can get some feedback from her, giving you the confidence that the project that you're proposing is indeed eligible. Now, you can't get a guarantee of eligibility, but you can get a looks like it fits the parameters pretty well sort of assurance. It also will give your contributors the confidence that the project you're proposing is really going to happen. So just as though you were going to a bank to say, hey, I'm going to use this money, and this money to pull this project together. This is how much it's going to cost. This is where I'm going to build it. All of those same sorts of things will give your contributors the confidence that if they write a check and designate it for your project, that that project is actually going to be built. Then another thing that I would suggest is that you get pledges from at least your key contributors by the fourth quarter of the year for the following year. So working now, and I know some have told me that they really lock them down in that January timeframe right before the window opens, but trying to get an idea that you're going to get enough contributors to get your project across the finish line in terms of that last funding source, so that those contributors feel like they're pretty locked in by the fourth quarter of the year. So they're ready to make that contribution as soon as the window opens the following year. I'd encourage you to develop kind of a marketing plan. Who are the contributors that you think you might be interested in the project? Maybe holding some in-person or video meetings to tell them about the project and get a little bit of excitement going in your area about a particular project that you want to bring to the table. And finally, I do encourage you to use MHP's State Housing Tax Credit project page. It gives you a free form to do a brief description. And one of the things that it does is once you look at what the application form looks like on the Minnesota Housing website, you can then essentially write all of the information that your contributor will need. They can literally cut and paste the language from the MHP website into the Minnesota Housing registration form. So there is or application form. There is an ability to put, for example, the project number that you get assigned by Minnesota Housing. If you register your project, you can put that in your little one paragraph description. It also provides a place where you can put a phone number of the person from your organization that if a contributor runs across your project and wants to designate their contribution to it, that they know exactly who to call and ask more about the project. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Elizabeth, and we'll take some questions, I think, at the end.
Yeah, I might just thank you so much, Mary. That was a great overview, and I think really highlights how this is a successful and popular program because of the flexibility of use, its design, all sorts of things. And we're learning a lot about the program from utilizers like you about how to continue to think about how we strengthen the state housing tax credit program. I was just looking in the chat to see if there were any immediate questions. I'm not seeing any immediate ones, so I think we will hold until the end to see if there's other things that come up. And is Tom here? I know he had to join a little bit late. Tom, are you here? All right. Great. So I'm turning things over then to Tom Johnson, who's been really generous with sharing some of his insights on previous years, and we're glad to have you back. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, as I asked,
We are having trouble hearing you. Your microphone is not, and it may be what it is, but
is this one better?
Perfect.
Good. All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. Just for those of you who don't know, I'm Tom Johnson, a partner at Mahoney CPAs. Our firm does a lot in the affordable housing industry. Been around and been an advocate for this program for a number of years. I have a question for Mary though. If you submit or register a project and you say the contributor wants confidence that it will close and happen, does it make or break a deal? what if you need it to happen, would you
Um,
put it
it
in?
does not make or break the deal from the contributor's standpoint, and that's a great thing to bring up, Tom. Once the contributor has made the contribution to a designated project, they get their tax credit certificate and they are able to take their tax credit regardless of whether the project goes forward or not. So it's kind of a hold harmless for the contributor, but there is a tremendous disappointment on the part of the contributor if the project that they thought they were contributing to doesn't go forward. So that's what I meant by that, Tom, and I'm glad you
Uh,
made that distinction. It's not that they don't get their credits, but they were really counting on that project happening in their community, and they will be disappointed, and it'd probably be really tough to go back to them again.
got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Can you click to the next slide? So I know this has already been done, and it's been said multiple times today, but this program is what makes it unique and authentic is that anyone can do it. So eligible contributors, anyone can do it. An individual can do it. It's non-complex. You don't need a bank. You don't need a team of lawyers or attorneys or CPAs, which is great. It keeps the cost down. It's a great program. People ask us about it. We really like it and enjoy it. I think most people know the mechanics of it. One other thing I'll say, there's a pretty large federal bill that was passed this summer, the One Big Beautiful Bill. As of right now, and maybe even in the future, it doesn't really affect this program. Minnesota doesn't conform to it right now anyways, even if there was something. So it's really a Minnesota program. It depends on your Minnesota tax liability, how much benefit it can be to you. So I say you don't need a team of CPAs. You maybe don't even need a CPA, depending on how involved you are in your own personal taxes. But if you pay Minnesota tax, in a great place to start is your prior year's return. So look at 2024. And if you have a tax liability, you can get benefit from this program. It's that simple. The next slide. A couple just specifics. It is a non-refundable tax credit, which means, if you contribute enough money to get a $10,000 credit, but you only have a $5,000 tax liability, you can only use $5,000 that year, but it will carry forward to the next year. So you can offset future tax liabilities for up to 10 years. Non-residents and part-year residents, I think you should contact your CPA because there's prorations and different things you'd have to do. We have seen partnerships use these tax credits and make contributions. So partnerships, LLCs, that'll just get passed through a K-1 to you. Next slide. This schedule hasn't changed, but this is where if you were doing a personal return, there's a place to enter your credit on the tax return. A lot of people will call and ask where that goes. It's right here on line 15 of your personal Minnesota return. The next page. This is the same, the mechanics of this, but generally it is this simple. So if you have a $10,000 tax liability in 2024, I'd start with that number. And then you can work from there on what you think is 2025. And you want to cancel out that tax liability, you would have to contribute $11,765 to the fund. You get an 85% tax credit, just 10,000, and then you have no tax liability for 2025. The one part of the One Big Beautiful Bill that might have a small effect is you can take a federal donation, even if you don't itemize, as a deduction. So if you didn't, there's this federal benefit part. If you did not itemize, you usually, in the past years, you wouldn't have been able to take this $1,765 federal deduction on your federal return. Now, after the one big beautiful bill, you can take a deduction for $1,000 for a single filer or $2,000 for a married filing jointly. So you could potentially use this if you hadn't before. That's the one change. You know, with the two combined, you really, if you put in 10,000, it's really a 90%. You'll get $10,000 state benefit, federal benefit of 653. That's 90% of your contribution you get back. The other question, if you go to the next slide, that I get asked a lot is, why do this program? You know, there's a cost. You're only getting 90% back. So there's 10% that's sort of a cost to the donor. Why do this program? And it's this leverage scenario. So if you normally contribute to a development or to a nonprofit developer $1,000 to build a project, you're out $1,000, you made your donation, and you get your charitable donation deduction. With this tax credit, you can contribute $6,667. You get an 85% tax credit back, $5,667. So your net cost is still $1,000. So you've contributed $1,000 in either scenario. The project gets 7 times more money in the state credit, 6.67 times. So that's the real benefit, is you can leverage to multiply what the project gets. That is the bulk of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions as well, but I'd send it back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for just really spelling this out in a very clear way, so we can understand those implications. We do have at least one question here. We'll see if there's a couple, just to take advantage of your expertise. How does a contributor recognize the 15% that does not come back as a credit? Is it an expense or a charitable contribution or some other designation?
So you can do so that's where it goes back. You can put that as a charitable contribution on your federal return, the 15%.
Okay.
So it's the equivalent of a federal donation.
And I might just add that the certificate that is issued by Minnesota Housing does include the magic language that allows your tax preparer to get comfortable with the fact that no goods and services were received for that 15%. And I can personally say that I made a contribution, and that the magic language worked, and what Tom has laid out in the scenario actually is possible.
So another question I see here is, can a contributor use their RMD in this program? I'm not sure what RMD is.
So required minimum distributions.
Okay.
I assume. I don't believe so. I don't think that you would be able to use your RMDs.
It cannot be considered a qualified charitable contribution, which is the question where you use your required minimum distribution to give directly to a charity, and it cannot be used for that.
Okay. We have a couple more questions, just with folks still feeling a little confused on kind of, since I think, Mary, you referred to the magic language. What's the magic language? And maybe as a follow-up, or even in the chat now, I don't know if someone, Chrissy, has the ability to put a link to that document in the chat. Or we
I
can
can
also
try and
send
cut
something as
the,
a follow-up.
yeah, we don't share the templates for the tax credit certificate, but I can do a cut and paste of the language. It'll just take me a minute or so to dig it out, but I'll go do that right now.
Okay. And we can also send it with our recap. All right. One last question, and then we're going to turn to Mark. It says, Chris says, after a contributor submits their online application, how long will it be before they receive the signature form from Minnesota Housing? So it's more a MHFA
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, so we say typically within 10 business days. I will give the caveat, if I get 500 applications in the first week, I'm probably going to have to send out an email. It might take me a little longer to wade through it, but typically within 10 business days. And it's usually at the shorter range, but
I would also just comment that it comes out as a DocuSign document. And so it's really very easy and very straightforward to deal with it.
All right. Well, I'm going to invite Brian to take down the slides. Our next speaker doesn't use any slides, and we're going to turn to a little bit more of storytelling. We're really fortunate to have Mark Borseth here. For many years, he worked with the city of Thief River Falls. Now he is working for DigiKey, which did get very involved in making a major contribution using the state housing tax credit. So, Mark, I wonder if I can turn things over to you. I think you're going to kind of give us a little bit of an overview, and then we'll see if folks have questions about what made this feel successful to DigiKey.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me again. Mark Borseth. I'm the Senior Director of Community Development and Corporate Facilities for DigiKey. And just a little background about DigiKey. We're an electronic distributor in Northwest Minnesota and Thief River Falls. We ship about 25 to 30,000 orders every day to over 180 countries worldwide. Truly a global company. Doing distribution out of Northwest Minnesota without an interstate is pretty impressive that they're able to do that. But anyway, so DigiKey has been around since the early 70s and employs almost 4,000 people in the state of Minnesota, which I believe we are the largest private employer out of the metro area in the state of Minnesota. And in 2022, DigiKey opened a new product distribution warehouse, which is according to the Minneapolis Tribune did a story this weekend and says we are second to Terminal 1 at the Minneapolis airport in terms of size of buildings in the state. So it's a massive facility with an incredible amount of automation and sophistication. And we inventory a tremendous amount of materials. And it takes about, in Thief River Falls, there's around 3,400 employees. And, with the number of people in the workforce declining, it's a challenge for a community of under 9,000 people to employ, not too far from 4,000 people. So very challenging situation. And so housing is critically important to us. And we track housing progress from a couple of housing studies, one in 2012 and another one done a couple of years ago. And we have a documented need for just over 100 housing units per year, every year for the next 10 or 12 years. So in a smaller community, that's a challenging thing to do. So we're really doubling down on how do we get people to come to Thief River, and we're trying to do a lot of marketing around our community and what we have to offer. But we absolutely need housing to be successful, and this program, and I have to thank Chrissy and Mary. I talked to both of you quite a bit in 2024 when we did this, and they were a tremendous help. I probably asked an awful lot of questions, but it seems to it is truly as simple as they say it is from a contributor standpoint. And I think it's just so important. I think this is one of the best programs I've ever seen come out of the state of Minnesota to shift some opportunity back to private people and private companies, because this housing shortage in Minnesota, I believe that it's still around 100,000 housing units is the data that's available. And even with just apartments alone that are $200,000 a door, that's a $20 billion problem. And there's no way that problem is going to get solved without some help. It just doesn't work for people without some type of outside investment to make it affordable for the end user and viable for the developer to do the work. So we feel this is just a fantastic program. We did $2 million donation in late 2024. We did another 1.5 million in right away in 2025. And we have partnered with DW Jones, Skip DeShana, who I'm sure a lot of you people know, is just a premier developer. And so he has put together a 65 unit workforce housing project, multifamily at Thief River. And that is scheduled for groundbreaking this spring. Also really want to highlight one of the bullets that Mary had on her slide is that, contributors want to confirm and protect, that this is actually going to happen. And I really can't emphasize that enough either. You really need to be deep enough into a project and have a lot of trust with your partner in this. I mean, especially from a company like DigiKey, we have to be 100% certain that project will happen in Thief River Falls to put that kind of investment into it. But the investment becomes secondary behind the need. The need is so great that that's where we really need that to happen in our community. So, we're interested in doing this again. We're working on an RFP right now with some developers that have approached us, and we're interested in potentially investing again. I don't know if it'd be 26 or more likely 27, but I just can't say enough good things about this program. The only thing, I think it should be larger. I think the sunset should be taken away. I think it should be accepting more funds, because this is truly one of the few programs that is not, it doesn't have to be restrained. It's a great program. So that's, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
Thanks so much, Mark. I'm just going to kind of see if folks want to pop anything in the chat. I think it's really exciting to know. I think one thing that's just very interesting to me is kind of contrasting your story of how DigiKey has really felt like this is a great program, so much so that you're even looking for an additional opportunity or project that makes sense for utilizing the program again. And yet we see that there, we have a high, I don't think Mary had a slide with the number of contributions, but that number is very high, in part because of how many individuals have contributed to projects across the state. And we're also seeing, Habitat is a great example where they have been able to really make great use of this and kind of contrast that single house attractiveness to folks to contribute to housing in their community, to how DigiKey is looking at this kind of bigger economic, project that serves a large number of people and serves the broader community in addition to DigiKey. So thanks so much, Mark. Just because we are so close to the end, I actually think that there is a nice transition here. If Brian could throw up my last couple slides here, where just a couple last messages that I want to leave you with. Again, MHP has worked with many of you in crafting the concept for this project, working with lawmakers over many years to get it adopted, and with staff and people like Mary, who was, our former commissioner and then now with our current commissioner and staff on how to think and conceptualize this program. And we are now at the stage where we really have some important work to do in how to continue this very successful program. So there are two things that we are working on that are legislative objectives. MHP is working with a group of partners, and essentially, let me just give you a heads up. I'm going to be reaching out to many of you on this call for how you can help as well. But first is what we're calling kind of a smaller tweak to the program, a policy tweak that was introduced last year. This is just a smallish change to the design of the program so that it then can be paired with the Greater Minnesota Workforce Housing Development Program. Currently, the design of the program is not a match to the parameters, the policy parameters of the Workforce Housing Development Program. So that is something that is in the works. It did get into the tax bill last year, but did not make it across the finish line. We know that there is no opposition to this as an issue. We just kind of need to push a little bit harder. And Senator Nelson was our chief author of this in the Senate. And as you can see, she's very committed to the program, spending her time to be on this call. The second issue is really the bigger one. This program, in order to get it across the finish line, was really set up almost, you might call it, as a pilot. It wasn't called a pilot, but that is sort of the feel of the program because it was set up with a sunset of 2028. And our objective now is to eliminate this sunset so that the program can be permanent. And then an objective after that would be how do we continue to grow this program? So this is our objective right now, is to work with lawmakers and with other partners on what's the strategy for moving this forward. We have, I think, Courtney Schaaf is here. She is MHP's policy manager. I want to make sure she gets introduced, and maybe, Courtney, you can pop your contact information in the chat. Courtney will be leading the charge on this with some of our other partners. Second thing, I just want to do kind of a quick commercial, if you can change the slide one more, that some of you have been bringing up how you have used MHP's project page, which is the only place that we are aware of where collectively there is kind of a landing place to be able to market your projects. And we know that this may not be used by everyone to market their projects, but it is heavily used. I think currently we have about 70 projects that are listed on the MHP project webpage. And as I said, we're really actively trying to make sure that in line with Mary's feedback to get ready for the project launch for the program launch in 2026, that you take the opportunity to update your projects. We're also seeking feedback on how to continue to improve that project page, and we will forward this short survey to folks as a recap. We've hit 2 o'clock, so I just want to say thank you again to all of our speakers and to all of you for being on the call. We look forward to working with you on a successful launch for the 2026 program and moving forward our objectives at the legislature. Thank you so much. Thank you, speakers.